Okay, while officials in the western U.S. struggle to contain the raging wildfires, both presidential candidates are weighing in on the cause of the disasters. Take a listen.
We have to do a lot about forest management. Obviously, forest management in California is very important. And now it extends to Washington and extends also to Oregon.
With every bout with nature's fury caused by our own inaction on climate change, more Americans see and feel the devastation.
All right, let's go to Weijia Jiang, who's standing by for us at the White House to talk about this. Weijia, when you see the governor of California and he is humbly, I mean, that's the word that he used, humbly asking the president to understand and to respect the science behind what we're seeing playing out across the western part of this country. And you see the president's response where, a reporter asks him afterwards about climate change and the role that it plays and what we're seeing. And the president, responds that it's about forest management. And he points to what's going on in Finland and in Austria, who, by the way, are not the second largest emitter of emissions into the planet. So that's why perhaps they don't have the same situation that we have here in this country. How are these wildfires playing a role in the presidential campaign?
Well, the wildfires are just shedding light on a bigger issue, and that is climate change. And that is the scientific consensus that climate change is the reason why we are seeing so many of these break out. But as you mentioned, the president continues to, if not reject that science, certainly question that science, saying that he thinks it's actually because explosive trees have fallen in the forest and no one's cleaning them up, and that's why they are burning. We should mention that, as the governor of California pointed out to him, that the state and local governments control about 3% of the state's land, while the federal government is responsible for more than 50% of that land. But even beyond that, the governor urged him, as you mentioned, to acknowledge climate change, that was really what was going on. And it wasn't just him. There were other officials during this briefing about the wildfires that asked the president to do the same thing. And at one moment, the president said, "It's going to get cooler, just you watch." An official said, "That does not square with science." And then the president said, "I don't think science knows." I don't really know what he means by that, but again, he is certainly inserting skepticism into what the data, the research, and the scientists have said time and time again. And so this is a campaign issue because we quickly saw Joe Biden punch back and say, look, this is not a partisan issue. This is science. This is the one thing that's not actually red or blue. It is black and white because you have the information there that shows, that lays out exactly how the world, how the climate is heating up. And that's something that has to be addressed. And I think it's really interesting that he actually used this to address another attack that the president has been using, especially in recent weeks, saying that the suburbs are in jeopardy and that if the Democrats win, they will essentially disappear. Well, Biden said that if the administration, if those in power do not really tackle climate change, that's how suburbs will be destroyed, because they will catch on fire, they will flood, and so he said the neighborhoods would be burning in a different way than what the president is warning, which is that there will be anarchy and crime, et cetera.
Yeah, there are a lot of intersections there. When the president says, I don't think science knows, I thought about the conversation about science and the coronavirus and how often he has been at odds with the nationally recognized experts. I thought about the recent Trump appointee to NOAA, who, particularly as we're sort of facing down another hurricane, who's known for diminishing the impact of climate change. It's more than just, what's happening on the West Coast here. We've had this sort of conversation about whether or not there's an attack on science, and you really have to wonder about it. But I want to ask you about something else, because you had a really interesting conversation with Michael Caputo. He's the Health and Human Services spokesperson. He kind of made a number of statements on Facebook that got a lot of people's attention. He accused some government scientists of working against President Trump. You spoke to him about these accusations. He also mentioned something about his mental health, dealing with the coronavirus and the pandemic. What did you learn from that conversation? You spoke to him for like 45 minutes.
Yes, and so I think what's important to note first is that this is the spokesperson who is in charge of the messaging from the Department of Health and Human Services, which of course is taking the lead in trying to battle COVID-19. And Caputo stood by his assertion that there are scientists working against the administration, working against President Trump, who want to wait until after the election to really do anything productive because their main goal is to take down the president. So that is a conspiracy theory that he says is not exclusive to HHS, but is in other departments as well. The more concerning piece of this, though, is the fact that he admitted during this Facebook live chat with all of his friends and followers, he said that his mental health had failed him. And so that matters, because if he's acknowledging that and he's still doing the job, still in the same role that he's assigned to, you have to wonder how that's impacting the work that he's doing. He actually said that his mental health is strong, but told me it is challenged because of everything he's going through. He claims that his family has been harassed and threatened multiple times. He says that there is a lot of pressure that comes along with dealing with the grave subject matters linked to the coronavirus, and admitted that that's really wearing down on him as well. And so, skeptics, though, and critics say that's not an excuse, and that he made several other pretty wild remarks during this venting session on Facebook, and that he should not be allowed to maintain his role, which is critical in getting the American public the information they need to make decisions about their daily lives.
Yeah, and Weijia, as you know, he previously deleted a series of tweets and social media posts in which he attacked Chinese people. And so he has a history of doing this. He's been a fiery supporter of the president on television for quite some time. Speaking of wild accusations and sort of the recent tapes that I heard this morning on CBS This Morning that Bob Woodward has of the president of the United States talking about the coronavirus to Bob Woodward, the legendary journalist, where he says back in August that he was in a White House meeting recently with 10 people in the Oval Office, and that someone sneezed and everyone bolted out of the Oval Office. And the president says, including me, by the way, the very same day that he was pushing states to reopen. And then you watch these rallies that the president is holding. I'm just curious. I know that the White House is responding. They're talking about the president's, what he did with China and shutting down travel with China. But how are you getting any response to the fact that the president of the United States says that this coronavirus to him was so deadly and he was so worried about it that when somebody innocently sneezed in the Oval Office, he ran for the doors, and yet he's got these rallies where people are packed into closed spaces?
So the sneeze is relatively new, so the president has not addressed that yet, but I'm sure he'll be asked about that. But it certainly is just an extension of the other behavior that we saw in private versus what he was saying in public. Another portion of that audio recording was, of course, the president saying that he knew how deadly this virus was, that he knew how contagious it was, while telling people in front of the camera something very different. But he has actually defended this staunchly, and he says, look, I'm a leader. I can't be inciting panic, and I can't be screaming death. Whenever the question that he hasn't answered is why he's willing to do that on other subjects. For example, like we just talked about, warning that people were going to take over their lives and their suburbs if the Democrats were to win. But you make a really great point that goes hand in hand with what Anne Marie was saying, which is that despite what we're hearing, even if they are issuing new warnings, it's actions that matter. And just yesterday, the president held another indoor event and even said himself that it looks like a rally because it was packed. There was no social distancing. There were very few masks. So it seems that despite the fact that we are in, month 6 or 7 of the pandemic, the behavior, the actions do not reflect the science. And so people at home look at that, and that dictates how they're going to behave themselves when in public.
Yeah, Weijia, thank you so much.